So welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Beth. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Tell the listeners about you and what was the driving force of you becoming a writer?
Yeah, so it started out when I was pretty young. I used to make up my own storybooks when I was little. I would just write them out and illustrate them and staple them. And I started writing stories pretty early, and that pretty much stayed with me. And I kept writing, and there were some breaks, like when I was in college, and some of during my work years. I had to kind of back burner writing, but I have really tried to stay with it. And I basically a few years or several years now back, I was able to kind of cut back with work and just do freelancing. And that has really opened up more time to write. And so I've been spending, just a lot more time on it. And an important part of my writing process has been getting critiques of my writing. So one really important thing has been to join up with other writers. And I've been involved in several writers groups where we read each other's manuscripts, and I've gotten really incredible help from those other writers to try to build myself as a writer. So
sounds good. So you've been doing this since a young age. So that's excellent.
Yes. Very
so
much.
That's great. So you have written 2 books, and the other one will be released in 2024.
Yeah, I actually have I have 3 books out actually. So it'll be my 4th book. So
okay. Sorry, I thought it was
that's okay. That's okay.
So do you mind giving the audience, the listeners, a little insight into what your novels are about?
Sure thing. Yeah. So my first novel was Marian Hatley, and it was set in 1931 during the Depression. And it kind of followed a seamstress. She was a corset maker, and she got into a little bit of a scandal in the city where she was working. So she fled to the country to take care of an elderly relative. And there she kind of uncovers all kinds of secrets about her aunt and herself. And she also invents a really comfortable, innovative corset. She kind of makes her name that way. And then the second book was In This Ground, and the main character was a grave digger. And most of the story is set in a cemetery, and he's dealing with a lot of grief and trauma in his life. Like he was in a rock band, and buried in the cemetery is the lead singer from his band, and he feels responsible for his death. So he's really dealing with that. And the third book is called I Mean You No Harm, and it's kind of a suspense thriller. It's about 2 sisters who have, they're half sisters, but they share a father who's a career criminal. And after he dies, they kind of end up getting stuck with some of his unfinished business that they have to deal with. And then my newest novel, which isn't coming out until 2024, it's basically kind of a haunted house Gothic novel. And it's about an artist she inherits this house in the country and finds out that it might be haunted, and also her neighbor, who's this handsome, charming guy, might not be who he seems. So,
so your genre is mystery, suspense. What genre?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, good, excellent. So the one you just talked about, what inspired you to write I Mean You No Harm? What inspired you to write that book?
It's interesting. This was several years ago. I read a story in The Guardian about a woman who discovered when she was still very young that her father was in the mob, and it really turned her world upside down. She didn't know it, and she was just kind of reconciled, like, this guy's my father, but he's committing these crimes. And it just really stayed in my head. And I thought about, like, what would it be like to be that woman? And like, not only do you find that out about your father, but then eventually you kind of find yourself entangled in his unfinished business, and you have to deal with that. And so that's that. When I read that story, it just really haunted me. I felt like I have to write about that.
So this book is out. It's on Amazon, the one you just talked about.
It is, exactly.
Where did you get those ideas from for your novel? It sounds really interesting. It sounds like a movie plot.
Oh, you mean for the one that I Mean You No Harm? Or
yeah.
Yeah.
I Mean You No Harm.
It's funny. Like I definitely like the Guardian article about the mobster was definitely an inspiration. But then I kind of got the other aspects of the story. There's a big road trip is involved. Like the 2 sisters have to hit the road to kind of deal with their father's stuff. And I've always loved road novels and road movies. So there was that aspect of it too that was really inspiring. And oh, and just to go way back when I was talking about my novel about the corset maker, the big inspiration behind that was my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. She basically worked on a farm, and it was an era when women wore corsets still. So she was wearing this really uncomfortable corset in this hot weather. So I just thought, oh gosh, there's got to be a woman who can invent something better than that.
Yeah, I don't know how these women did it back then. It's like this thing is so tight in the
I
waist.
know,
How did
I
they
know.
breathe?
I complain about, just wearing a bra, and I can't imagine what they have to do it.
So Beth, what method of writing do you use? Do you use the snowflakes? Do you use editing as you go?
It's funny. I'm pretty old fashioned in that I just, I sit in front of my computer and just kind of tap things out. And sometimes I write longhand on notepads. But one thing that I do with novels is I like to have kind of a very rough outline just to kind of know where the story's heading. And I never really follow it to the letter, but it just kind of keeps me from getting stuck and keeps me moving. So that's one thing that I do. So that helps.
So do you write every day, or do you have like a certain amount of words that you cover for the day, or you write for the day?
It varies. Like sometimes, like right now, it happens that I'm kind of taking a little bit of a break just because I wrote all these books, kind of boom, boom, boom. But when I'm really in the groove, I really try to get up. I'm best in the morning, so I try to like write first thing and put at least a few good hours in. And sometimes I'll come back a little later, but I find that I really do try to write every day, and I try to do it early. That's my best time.
So what advice would you give to others, like young writers or even older writers that want to start or write the second novel and get it published?
I would say probably the biggest advice I could give, or the thing that has been most helpful to me is that get as much input on your writing as you can. Like, I just feel like we can't see all of the potential issues with our writing, and we really need that feedback. So I would really recommend that. Like, if you find a writers group, or sometimes there's online communities where people can exchange writing and comment on it. And just for me personally, like if you're writing a novel, like everyone has a different strategy, but I found I used to give my writer friends chapter by chapter. Like I would send them a chapter and then wait for their comments and then send them another chapter. And I found that really set me down a rabbit hole, and I would never move forward with a novel. So what I do now is I don't show it to anyone until I have a complete first draft, and then I send it to them. And then I find the feedback a lot more helpful.
So all three of your novels deal with grief in some way. Why did you bring this element into your story?
It's really interesting. I find that especially as I get older, like I just have been affected by loss more and more. And I felt like it's always in the back of my mind, even if I'm just, the people, the loved ones that I've lost over the years. And I actually got to a point a number of years ago, right after my parents died, they died within 4 months of each other. And I was just at a point where, I couldn't really move forward with my writing. And I ended up kind of thinking, like, instead of letting grief be an obstacle, why don't you let it help fuel your writing? So it ends up that, I found that writing about it and through my characters was really a great way of, you never get over the sadness of losing someone, but I feel like writing about it, it kind of lets you see new angles on it and kind of lets you come to terms with some things about it. So, yeah. And I think, for me personally, it's just like my loved ones are always with me. And I feel like it's kind of like a way that I kind of connect with them too.
So you started writing a little bit more when your parents passed away, or were you?
Yeah, at first I was a little blocked because I was so sad, but then I was like I was just kind of letting the grief, I was kind of, I don't know if this is the right expression, but kind of channeling it. And right when that happened, I was writing the book about the gravedigger. So I ended up really getting into, I might have mentioned that the main character, he felt responsible for the death of his bandmate. And I really try to channel my feelings into what he was feeling about feeling guilt and sadness over that loss. So
I'm sorry about your loss, Beth.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So where can the listeners get a copy of your book? And do you have any encouraging words for the listeners?
Yeah, they can go for my latest book, I Mean You No Harm. They can go to the publisher, Imbrifex. It's IMBRIFFEX. I think I just spelled that I'm not sure if I got that. Imperfects Books, or they could go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Mhm.
Or bookshop.org if they would like to do that. And yeah, in terms of words of inspiration, I just think, I feel so privileged to be able to do something that I love. And I think, like, gosh, if you could find anything that you love, just hold on to it and keep doing it. I mean, even something else I do is knitting. And sometimes when I just need something kind of somewhat, I want to kind of tune out, like find something that, makes you happy and hold on to it and keep doing it. And also treasure your friends and loved ones.
Well, Bev, thank you so much for being on Beauty of Colors podcast. It was great to.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.